Welcome to the Iridium Conversations, a podcast where we explore how using NLP can help coaches access excellence in every conversation that they have. My name is Misha Bajaj and I'm a partner at Iridium. I am also an ICF BCC coach and a Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder centered coach. I'm also an NLP trainer and I do hope that we are able to help you as a coach. I'm going to bring in the perspective from the coach's world into this conversation.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Damle, and I'm not yet a credentialed coach from an ICF perspective, but I'm an NLP trainer, and I'm also on the track to be an NLP master trainer. So I'm really hoping that through this podcast, we can clarify how to our listeners, how NLP can be an enabler in your coaching practice. And that's really what we're hoping to do.
So let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Iridium Conversations. I'm your host, Misha Bajaj, and today I am wearing my coach's hat to explore a topic that is the heartbeat of our profession. How do we develop presence as a coach? And joining me to unpack this through the lens of NLP is Nikhil, wearing his NLP trainer and master trainer hat.
And I think when you said that it's the heartbeat of our profession, the other thing that comes to my mind when I hear this word presence is something that Judith Delosier says many times, which is that if your presence can't do it, there's no point of using words.
Beautiful. Yeah. And actually, more than that, a lot of times you've said, Nikhil, that, having presence, or when a coach is presence, it's almost like you're being a breeze, that can be felt with the effect that it has. And that's such a poetic way to put it. But, let's just elaborate on this a little bit so that we understand what you're really trying to say.
So I think there are two words which are used by coaches, and I've seen a lot of my friends from, who are ICF credentialed coaches use this also, which is to be curious and non-judgmental, right? And in a way, sort of presence comes to my mind. The other word that comes to my mind is non-invasive, which means that if we fundamentally look at what a coach does, the coach is assisting, the coach is a support to whoever it is that the client is, and the client is performing, whether it is at their workplace, whether it is in relationships. They're approaching the coach because they're seeking better performance in whatever aspect that they'd like to get better at, right? So therefore, coach is always in the background. And so when we say that coach's presence is felt, it can't be screaming in the performance, but it's the performer that has to realize that there's an input that came from the coach, and that's what is reflecting right now as I'm performing. That insight is present, the one that I got in the conversation with the coach. One of the things that I can sort of remember from cricket, and this is true, stylistically also, as we grow up, sometimes naturally children pick up left-handedness or right-handedness, right? And in some society, left-handedness not good. And so it's like that, right? So I remember the example of Sachin Tendulkar, because he used to hold the bat really at the bottom of the handle. If it is this long and the bat is here, typically the right grip would be to hold the handle in somewhere in the middle, and that gives you good control over it. But probably he started playing when he was a kid, and the bats that were available were of people taller than him.
Yeah, correct.
And so how do you adjust to a bat which is much bigger than how big you are, is how he just started holding it right at the base. The beauty was with his coach, his name was Ramakant Achrekar. And he could have looked at that grip and said, well, boy, that's not the way to hold it. But he spotted that there's something already about him that works, and didn't change that grip. And then he became how famous he has become today for how good a cricketer he is. So rather than tweaking and changing, and this is where probably the presence means also the presence of the coach to recognize what is working with the client already. Because often we might get sucked into thinking that this looks like a problem.
Right.
And really, if I have to think about problem in another way, it is capabilities not suitable to this context.
Capabilities not suitable to this context. Okay.
So that I'm not able to do something here means whatever capabilities I'm bringing into this context don't seem to work here.
Right.
And we often say, right, that clients possess all the resources that they have. They are all within them. So in a way, then the coach's role is about recognizing what capabilities might work in this context, or can we shift the context so that these capabilities start working. And that's something that then is also the presence of the coach in recognizing and fully seeing the client as valid for what they are in their world, but just trying something better. And they're then really using the coach's present as a spotlight, or as a lens, or as a mirror, that if I were to put spotlight on what is going on in my performance now, is there something different that might be visible? And that's the reason why I often use that analogy that a coach's presence is like a breeze that is felt on the cheek, but the breeze is not seen, but the effect of the breeze is felt. And so that's really the way. If a client recognizes that something happened and something was available to me when I was in the coach's presence, or like we say, in the space that the coach provided, that means you're creating a context, you're creating an environment for your client to discover capabilities that might now work for them in that situation.
It's very interesting how you've kind of picked up examples from other areas and use those to explain such a topic that is so relevant for coaches. And really, from what you said, it's all about, as a coach, knowing when not to interfere.
Yes.
Right? Rather than always being there and wanting your own self to be in the spotlight, really.
I think one more thing on performance is that, think about it like this. Let's say I'm a coach and you are the client. So you brought something else in that you want to work on. So presence also means there's a performance, there's a way that I'm supposed to perform as a coach for me to be effective as a coach. And there's a certain way that you want to perform, which is why you've sought me as a coach. And my performance has to be focused on how well and how effective I can be in serving you and performing the way you want to perform. Right? So the collapse can happen if I link my performance with whether you get results or not. Whether you've understood what I'm saying or not. Are you really nodding and smiling, or am I looking for creating an aha moment with you? Then that's kind of invasive. Then that's intruding. So
I guess
that's another way I can think about it.
I think and that's very interesting that you said that, because I think a lot of coaches, especially when you're just starting up, you carry that impression that I've got to make this work, and the only way obviously is what is visible is the result or the performance. So it's almost a kind of a self-doubt. So you're as good as what the client is able to do.
It's like a performance anxiety for the coach as well.
Correct.
But it's just, and it's natural. I've just been trained. I'm eager. I'd like to use this. Let me see how much of an impact I can create. So that is also a natural part of a coach's journey. But now what we are saying about presence is really being aware that my performance anxiety as a coach need not come in the way of how I can help the client shape the way they perform.
Correct. However, it can be a little tricky even with seasoned coaches, I feel. Because a lot of us will bring up patterns from previous conversations. They tend to come in to the current conversation that we're holding, with the client. So how does one deal with that without imposing ourselves, or our judgments or interpretations or whatever the client might be going through?
Right. I think the key word that is there in your question is patterns. Right. And actually, if we are able to notice patterns, that's probably fine, because then what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to be informed by it. I think in our previous episode also we had mentioned about the difference between being informed and influenced. So which means that if I'm noticing a pattern, and really a pattern is when this happens in this context, this is what is said, or when this happens in this context, this is what is the observed behavior. And if there is a chain of this, then that means you have a reliable pattern that you are able to notice. Now, the trap of a pattern is that it can make us think, I think I know now what the client is about to say.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Often when asked about NLP, people ask that, so is it a way of reading people's minds?
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's about noticing. And in NLP, we use this word calibrating or calibration, right?
Yeah.
Which is coming from, science experiments, that you can have a measurement of 15 ml. And then that means it is 15 ml precisely. It's not roughly half a test tube. So experiments don't happen like that. It doesn't happen like take a little bit of hydrochloric acid and put a little bit of sodium. It doesn't happen like that. There are precise measurements. And there are precise measurements because when you're precise about what you observe, then it leaves you with the room of noticing what arises out of the interaction or the reaction of what's going on there. So if we allow ourselves to observe minus judging, then I would say that is calibrating. But if I'm observing that this is going on, so now this is what the client is about to say, then now we've added our judgment and we've killed curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Because that pattern might be true, but who knows, this time it might evolve or emerge slightly differently.
Yeah.
So are we able to stay in a state where we can tell ourselves, I am noticing the pattern, I'm going to be allowing myself to be informed by it, but I don't know how this will go. So using it as information rather than saying that now I know which direction this is going to go in. And this means that it allows us as a coach to step back and notice what's going on in the structure, right? In the structure of the experience. That means there are many things which are being said as content and details, but there is a certain dynamic which is also present in the structure of that situation. As a coach, if I'm able to notice that dynamic, then my questions can be about the dynamic rather than the situation. So I don't feel confident about going in front of crowds and speaking freely. The dynamic is that there is a situation, there is a certain kind of performance, and there is a certain quality that capability that this person is looking to access in that situation. That's a dynamic, or that's a structure. If I went into content, then I would say, okay, so what happens to you, when you're standing there, and now I'm getting into the detail of how they need to do. Whereas if I'm able to just calibrate that there are certain things that are happening in the dynamic of this situation, they might be able to reflect on it. And really, when we speak about discovery and the client realizing that there are answers that I can find out on my own, then if this kind of dynamic is not something that the client becomes aware of, then they will lose out. Then it's like a fickle solution or a fixing kind of an answer that we ended up giving them. So when we leave that room, when we keep that space, and this is again where presence is important, that presence to let the client notice the situation. How are they in that situation rather than what must they do in that situation? And if we're able to help the client stay with that, which means first for me to just calibrate, notice and call it for as it is. Right now you're nodding, right? So if I'm not calibrating, I would say, I can see, Misha, you're agreeing with me right now.
Yeah, correct.
But you could just be nodding as I'm listening and I'm paying attention to what Nikhil is saying. So I could say, Misha, you're nodding, what is going on?
Yeah.
Now you might say, I'm actually agreeing with you, Or you might say, whatever you are saying, I'm also playing it back and thinking, is it true for me? But if I say, Misha, I noticed that you're nodding. And if you happen to be reflecting internally, you will say, no, I was not agreeing with you. And now there's dissonance, right? So when there is presence, there is resonance. When there is no presence, then there is dissonance, which means there's like a clash going on. I'm trying to bring something in. You're saying, without saying that, you're saying, but listen to me first. And then that's a conversation where you can say presence is not present.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Calibration and resonance, two very good points that you brought out. And something that I use, resonance, something that I use when I'm coaching leaders for presence, really, because resonance is so crucial to presence as a leader. And I guess it's also because if you are a resonant leader, if you can have that resonance with your team or with the people you're working with, then you can inspire them or encourage them to do things. If that's not there, then that is really, like you said, a frugal solution to whatever the situation is. And it's pretty much like how a coach interacts with the client as well, right? I mean, if you can have that sort of a space that is that can create resonance for the client, then I think the conversation becomes so much more deeper, which is exactly what we are hoping for as a coach in any conversation, right? So we are not wanting to deliberately create aha moments, but we're leaving that space open so that the client can create it on their own.
I think aha moments, this is a very interesting thing, right? Aha happens, or eureka happens when you least expected that it is going to happen. But probably when the environment just was right for it to emerge, and then that's what surprised you and you said aha or eureka. But it can't be manufactured, right? So I think the extension of this is also, when you were speaking about experienced coaches, a lot of senior leaders in organizations also look at this as a skill, is an emerging need that the senior leaders must be equipped with. And then the fundamental difference in this particular thing is, how do I, as a senior leader, let's say with 25, 30, 35, 40 years of experience, solid experience, nothing doubting that, not let that come in the way of the presence, and the difference really will be that if I go back in the conversation thinking, the person just dumped on me everything that they knew, versus if they go back thinking, such an experienced person, but I was really able to feel that everything that I was saying was heard, and I really felt understood, and in that I was able to discover something because this person's presence or the space that they created was there.
But I think it can be sometimes very tricky because a lot of people might just get lost in the content of the conversation. So how does one deal with not getting lost in the content and still being present?
Right.
I remember this, and we use it a lot in our trainings, right? This quote by John Grinder, where he says that content is but a distraction. So how do we not get entangled with that and still be present in the conversation?
Got it. And partially, I think there is this percentages that are given, right? That only 7% of communication is spoken.
Correct.
So a lot of it is non-verbal. Now we are not debating whether 7% is accurate or not. But look at it like this, right? That your near and dear one comes home, and the way they ring the doorbell, or when they enter and they keep the bag down, no words need to be spoken to figure out what's going on right now. The moment somebody does that, it's like saying, don't disturb me right now. Right?
Or just the expression.
Just the expression,
look at their
right?
face and you can tell.
Exactly, right? Now, that is not because, to the earlier question, that is not judging. It's because day in, day out, you've seen them come through the door, notice the face, and that's what tells you. Usually the pattern when they come home and they're open to talking is this.
Yeah.
Today, it is a deviation from the pattern. I'm going to be informed by it. Let me stay out of their space. Let me give them their 30,
Right.
40 minutes of peace and quiet, right?
Makes sense.
Which means you are not focusing or hung up on, tell me, why are you quiet?
Yeah.
How come you are not speaking to me today? Why didn't you say hello? That
Why
would be
aren't you
going into
happy to see
details.
me?
Why aren't you happy to see me? That would be going into details, right? And however, looking at the pattern, you're able to notice that right now, let's not go into the details, right?
Right.
A very interesting example is when I don't know how come today all sports examples are coming to my mind, but there's this thing where, if you go for a tryout for cricket or badminton or any sport, right, there'll be 20 kids. And I also went to many of those tryouts, and I would think, how are they going to figure out whether I'm a good bowler or not just by making me bowl 6 times, right? But the coach has seen thousands of kids, and the coach can notice form. They might think that form is good, but this kid is very weak, so all that we'll need to do is make this kid stronger. But if the form is not right, that means when they say just that word, form is correct or the shape is correct, or first time, let's say after many days, if we go to a gym or we go to a yoga instructor, good yoga instructors or gym instructors will tell you, don't do more repetitions, get the form right. Right?
Correct.
When the form is right, that means you'll perform that exercise or that asana correctly.
Yeah.
But they're not just making up some stuff. They've noticed many people probably get injured, but probably achieve good flexibility, which helps them distinguish that this is good form, that is good form. And if we ask them what this form is and we ask them to elaborate on it, they might say, I was noticing the breathing of this person. I could notice the spine and the neck position. I could see how relaxed their body is. All of these are cues. To somebody untrained, it might look like they may have some X-ray vision. But this noticing of these cues is helping them, without getting into content, recognize, yeah, this might work for this person or this might not. So sports people will say flow. Musicians might say we were in a really great rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Or someone might say, like, carpenter, we have a family carpenter because he's just made furniture in all our homes. And when I had gone to his factory once, he said, I'm not looking at my worker, but from the sound of the implement, I can make out whether there is smoothness in the movement or not, right? So I had last year gone to one furniture making carpentry workshop with my son, and I was just using a hacksaw all day to make a wedge in that wood. But he said, Nikhil, continue with it. I'm not looking at you, but the sound that your saw is making right now, keep at it. That's the right rhythm to go when you're cutting with the saw. So somebody who's an expert in noticing structure will notice these structural elements. He didn't need to check how I was holding the saw.
Right.
He didn't need to check the position of where the saw was with respect to the wood, but he recognized that that particular rhythm, that the sound that the saw was making on the wood was enough of a cue for him, of having heard so many people do sawing, that he could recognize. And therefore then the content is not important. And therefore in a coaching context, words are not important, because if I'm able to notice the unconscious non-verbal cues that are being used by the person when they're speaking with me, then in a way, I'll be able to make out more of what's going on in the dynamic or in the structure of that situation.
So since you're getting all the sports examples, what's coming to my mind is, T20 is happening these days, and you have all these ads right in the middle, and there's this one ad from ChatGPT where this young girl is practicing.
That one where she's playing with the bat like that?
No, she's bowling. And
Okay.
then she's like, what do selectors look for? And
yes.
then they're like, consistency and, pretty much like you said, form and all of that.
Yes.
So, as a coach, and we are not saying that get into content. We are telling them, in fact, not to look at the words.
Yeah.
So what could be typically a few things that as a coach I could look at when I am in a conversation that will allow me to have a deep presence and yet not be intrusive?
Got it. Now, this is interesting because it goes back to the way we listen. uh, so we can listen to what is right now being said. You're speaking in English, you're using certain words. So I understand the meaning of those words. Therefore, I'm able to figure out what are you saying right now or what are you asking me. So I would say that is like listening with words. And a lot of times this distinction is made, right? Listening and hearing. So I would say this is hearing. I'm able to hear what you're saying. I may not respond to it. It may not register, but I've heard and I understood what you're saying. The second thing in this that I can look for, which a lot of coaches do and unknowingly, therefore I think it's good to call it out, right? In a coaching context, and let's say you are at that stage where you're about to set a contract for that session, and you ask the person what is it that they'd like to bring up. They could have a range of things that they could choose, and they pick something and they say, okay, changing my career. So they're saying the words changing my career. So I'm hearing with words. I'm listening with words. Now, can I listen with intent also? That in bringing this up, what is the intent? But not as guessing the intent. But I could ask, what made you bring this up in the conversation?
Right.
What makes this so important? How come it is something that you picked from several other things that you could have picked, right? So there is an intent based on which unconsciously I chose that I could go with that, I could go with that, I could go with that, but let me bring this up. I want to change my career and I want to speak about that. So therefore you could listen with words, which is to the earlier question, what you said, getting into content. But now you could pay attention to intent. Remember, people are saying something with an intent. To us, it might seem flippant or unimportant, but then that's just our judgment coming in. So if we're able to keep judgment out and pay attention to that, really why this is being said right now is because there's some intent behind it, which I don't know. And maybe the client has an intent which they've not been able to articulate. And if I'm able to pause on that and notice that and spot that, it might allow me to get to the structure again. Because when I ask somebody, what makes this important for you? It gives them a moment to reflect on it. They've not been asked that question. They're wondering, actually, how come I picked this?
So many things happened during the day.
So what could it be that's making me pick this? Now they're also thinking, what is my intent of coming up with this? So that's second, right? And then a third way of listening is really listening from the experience that the person is coming in. And often this happens where somebody is, let's say, 5 minutes late for the call, right? Or now this is also an interesting thing where you mentioned earlier that should we carry what happened in the previous call to the next call, right? But you could notice the experience. You could notice that last time when the call happened, this person came 5 minutes late. The time before that also they came 5 minutes late. Today also they've come 5 minutes late, right? I can say, well, you don't respect my time.
Right.
That's my world. Okay, that's fine. I can set that expectation after the call or before the next time happens. But I'm noticing a pattern 5 minutes late each time. I'm also noticing a pattern. They still show up 5 minutes late. That means there is certainly an intent why they're bringing themselves into the conversation and having that conversation. But this is also about experience. What's going on in the world of this person that they come like this?
Right.
And so if I pay attention that they're coming to me with an intent and there's something going on in the background in their world that I'm not privy to, I don't know, the question I can ask is everything okay? Without saying, you've come 5 minutes late the last 3 times, is everything okay? Then that's still judgment coming in. But without even alluding to the 5 minutes late, I can say, is everything okay? And in the world of that person, whatever is going on is going on. And still they've managed to sort of arrive, albeit 5 minutes late. But when they start with this question, is everything okay? It gives them a moment to just reground themselves that, okay, that whichever is going on. Now they're free to say that or not say that. But this question really brings out the coach's presence, that coach is not like a strict headmaster calling me out. But the coach is aware that something might be going on in my world that hasn't allowed me to arrive here on time but 5 minutes
Yeah.
late, and the coach is cognizant of asking me if everything is okay. And they might say, yeah, everything is okay, but keeping that awkwardness out of it then allows them to now just be here. So listening for words is just responding to, you said this, I said this, so I'll say this.
Yeah.
Listening for intent is paying attention to what made them bring this into the conversation, and listening for experiences, what's the world from which they're coming in.
I'm very tempted to ask you a question on the third one. I mean, intent, not content, is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I am very tempted to ask you a
Go for
question
it.
or two, but I think we'll just save it for the next episode.
Got
I
it.
think for this one, my last question would be really, how can NLP deepen my presence as a coach? How can learning NLP deepen my presence as a coach?
So, we spoke about calibration earlier, right? And one of the crucial things in calibration, something that we teach and learn in NLP is called using your sensory acuity. ACUITY, right? Or you can say, sharpening the manner in which you use your senses. So if you think about it, music can be a good example, right? To somebody who's very well trained, they might be able to make out what's the scale in which a song is being sung, what's the beat in which the percussion instrument is playing. But if I'm not trained like that, I may just realize, oh, I think this is that popular singer. Or from the tune, I might realize, oh, yes, this is my favorite song, right? Both of us might be listening to that song. But your level of sharpness of listening to that song is based on how acutely you're trained in using, let's say, training of listening to music, right? This goes back to that earlier part, which I said that the people who are able to just notice the swing and say there is good form in your badminton backhand, or in the way I was sawing the axe, that guy from the sound was able to say whatever you're doing is fine, is because they are trained very well in using their senses in the activity that they perform. So as a coach, we can look at several things, right? And I use the analogy of seeing the conversation. So, if we've all played Pictionary and dumb charades, right? So I start making a picture and I have to now guess what this picture is. Luckily in this, we don't have to guess. But if we imagine that everything that is being said by the client is a dot, and if each of these dots is starting to reveal a picture, not us guessing that picture, but it's starting to reveal a picture. Like when sometimes we look up on a clear night in Mumbai, on a clear night, when we look at the sky, then maybe stars are visible. But as kids, we would say, oh, these stars, if I join them, they look like an A, right? Or something else looks like a triangle, a constellation, right? That sensory acuity, that if I start training myself to look at something so closely, finer elements of that will become visible. I remember when I was in college and I would take trains, and on the railway bridge there used to be somebody who was visually impaired, and he used to sell lottery tickets, and people would buy by giving currency notes. So just by the feel of the currency note, he could make out 10 rupee note, 50 rupee note, 20 rupee note, 100 rupee note, which if I did with a person who was able to see, I could not make out from the feel what it is. That means his sense of touch was so finely developed, because he could not rely on his eyes, that the touch was highly developed, in the sense it allowed him to still figure out. Like that, another way of looking at it is really that in a way, these are like very nicely tuned radars, our senses, but probably we don't use it. So training ourselves to sharpen these senses can reveal much more than what is being spoken to us, right? Which means that the effect on the client is they're in the experience of being listened to with a high quality of attention. And then that's what sometimes people say that, I felt like I was seen and heard and felt, right? That means there's no judgment involved. And another way of sort of operating for the coach, right? These are cues that you can develop. So I can notice the tone, I can notice the inflection and the volume, I can notice gestures, movement and physiology, because all of this is accompanying what is being said.
Right.
So if I start paying attention to that acutely, how do you understand this language and vocabulary is what we learn in NLP. So what might seem like, this is some voodoo thing that these people are speaking about right now is not voodoo. These are things that can be taught and learned and transferred. But it means then you learn to take yourself out of the equation. You learn to become a very good observer. And if you learn to become a very good observer, more things become visible to you. For example, if you just went and sat at the same spot in the garden every day, by the 10th, 15th, 20th, 30th day, you will have observed so many more things just by being at that vantage point. And training ourselves to observe with a high quality of attention allows us to start noticing more things than are visible to a casual observer. Let's call it like that, right? So that's the difference of NLP and being trained in use of sensory acuity, being good at calibration. We spoke of resonance. That's really being able to create rapport with the person, right? And also about managing our own state. So if these are the four elements that are there, you manage your state, you're able to be in resonance and rapport with the person, you're able to sharply notice what's going on, and you're able to calibrate, then those can sort of really elevate your capability as being an effective coach in the conversation.
Beautiful. So we've moved from sports to wood sawing to music to being in the park, and I think we've now kind of landed at a good vantage point, like you said, where we've got a sense of what it could look like to have presence as a coach in a coaching conversation. And like you said, always watch the conversations, look at the conversations. And I think that's really useful. Everything that, the 4 points, the 4 main points that you just said, they completely sort of form the mantra of, having that deep presence in any conversation. Leave aside a coaching conversation. It could be just about any conversation.
Yeah, I think I often tell this, and probably people take it as I'm just making a lighter point or saying a funny thing, but I often say, please observe children, right? Not really as a lighter vein, but really observe them. All of these 4 things that I said are abundantly present in children. They have high degree of presence. They can acutely notice something. They're sharp. You think they've not understood, but they've understood.
They calibrate so well.
They calibrate so well, right? Yeah. How do they know? Should I ask mom or should I ask dad?
Correct.
They're able to calibrate patterns very well.
Which topics to discuss with which one?
Exactly. So that's a fantastic example. If there are kids around you, coaches should go and observe kids, because that's a fantastic example of how you can be as a coach. And just by being that, without trying anything extra, you'll be able to absorb so much more. And all of these 4 things that I said increase your ability to absorb more from the conversation when you are with a client.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's also a good point now for us to pause this conversation.
Yes.
And also invite our listeners and our viewers to really explore Iridium courses that we are offering, especially for coaches, because the courses that we offer also carry some CCU points that the coaches can use to get their accreditation done again, renewals of their titles, and I think it's a great place to learn NLP at Iridium.
Absolutely. And if this looks like it's very tedious or in depth, it is not. This is the way we have fun with it, and along the way you'll pick up these skills. So really come and look us up.
Yep. And with that, let's say goodbye for now, and we'll hope to see you in the next episode.
Yes, looking forward to having everyone back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and are taking away a few insights that you can put to practice and start playing with immediately.
And also, we would urge you to spread the word and follow us on LinkedIn to know when the next episode's out. See you next time in the next episode as we continue the quest for coaching excellence. Thank you.